Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here, playing another session of 1-2 No Limit 6 Max on Ignition. Thank you for joining. Upper left-hand table, a shorter stacked recreational player opens to 3x. The cutoff who posted blind automatically folds. Comes back around to me in the big blind. And we'll go ahead and defend this for a 3x open, especially with the extra blind out there. This is a very standard defense. No reason to 3-bet in this spot, though, especially against a shorter player who can just jam us back off. He bets 2/3, or a little over half to 2/3 type pot. I'm going to go ahead and fold this. If the board was less coordinated, and he bet a bit smaller, I think I might continue with overcards and a backdoor, queen of clubs type flush draw. I think it's okay to go ahead and fold, though. Lower right-hand table, got a 2.5x open from the cutoff. We're in the small blind. Going to go ahead and 3-bet with our king-queen offsuit, like a 10 or 11% range here. Ace-queen, king-queen, 7s plus, suited broadways, a couple suited wheel aces, a couple suited 9s, something like that. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise first in with the queens in middle position. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, we raise first in with pocket kings. If we're not doing something for an exploit, we're just trying to mimic what a solver would do in play, something like quote-unquote optimal, we probably have about a 45% raise first in range there. We already got him tagged as a wreck from seeing a limp on the HUD, but there's another one under the gun. I think it's pretty safe to say he's in fact a recreational player. Upper left-hand table will raise first in on the cutoff with pocket 9s. That's going to be roughly a 27-28% raise first in range. Get a suspected recreational player coming along from the small blind just based on his short stack. On a queen 6 deuce rainbow flop, I'm just going to go ahead and put in a small range bet, and he instantly folds. Upper right-hand table, queen 6 suited on the cutoff is a hand we'll raise first in. That's right around the bottom of our raise first in range. I would raise queen 6, queen 7, but not queen 5. Probably not jack 6, but I would raise jack 7 kind of thing. Recreational player calls in the big blind. Ace, queen 9, two-tone flop. We'll go ahead and range bet small. He snap calls the flop. 8 of diamonds, a flush closing turn. I continue betting with a smaller, probably a half pot or 2/3 type size. I think I prefer the half pot because the pool struggles with it a bit more. I would continue betting with my sets, my good top pairs, some weak top pairs that don't have a diamond that need protection, some naked diamond flush draws. I think I could do that with 10 jack, 10-7, 6-7 open-enders. Kind of like queen 6, no diamond. There's no reason to bet. I'll go ahead and check that back. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps the small blind on me. I'll go ahead and raise him up with king 9 from the big blind. We get led into small on the river. There may be some merit in trying to bluff raise this. I'm not entirely sure how much merit there is in that, though, against a rec. So I'm going to go ahead and fold. That's worth further exploration to see, though, as I do think that small river bet is probably not indicating very much strength. Lower left-hand table, we'll range bet on the ace-king-4 rainbow flop with our second pair medium kicker. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind. We'll go ahead and raise the 8-6 suited. Looks like a recreational player in the big blind playing 50 blinds deep. Ace-king-3, two-tone. We do have the flush draw. We'll check range to the big blind. He bets half pot. I think I would be check raising with my strong hands, like my kings, my threes, my ace-king. I think I would check call with pocket aces. I just have the board locked down so hard, especially if I've got the ace-ace with the ace of clubs. I would also want to check raise my combo draws like 5-4 clubs and the club Broadway draws. This weaker club draw, I don't want to raise up and then risk getting jammed off. I think I'm going to want to check and reevaluate. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. He gets isolated by middle position. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet our ace-king up out of the blinds. River, we get a flush closing river, so we make the flush. We're going to go ahead and value bet into him. We'd probably be bluffing after he checked back anyway. Upper left-hand table, the limper limp calls the 3-bet. In the original raiser also calls. We get a very lousy board for our range. We're out of position to 2 players. We can just go ahead and check. I think I'd probably be checking range here. Looking to check raise my overpairs. If I've got a hand like aces or kings, I think I would check to trap, along with my other weaker stuff, and then just go ahead and, check raise or check fold based on if my hand is strong or weak. Given that we've got this short stack out there with the half pot, I really don't think I have a lot of playability. I think I would start stabbing at this pot, even multi-way if I had a couple of full-size stacks out there. Because of the short stack, I'm not going to do so. I'm just going to go ahead and continue checking. If I peel an ace or a king, I can value bet. I think a diamond, I can even find a way to turn this hand into a bluff with the nut blocker. With ace-king high and nobody showing any desire for this pot so far, there's a reasonable chance my ace-king high is good, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep checking. I could probably even bluff catch, at least against the fish. And my ace-king high is in fact good, so I will take it. Picked up a 50-some blind pot at Showdown multi-way with ace high. I'm not too upset about that outcome. Lower right-hand table, get a 2x open in the cutoff from what appears to be a recreational player. We're going to go ahead and defend pretty much all of our suited combos, including queen 7 of spades. Upper right-hand table is interesting in that we get a button raise, a small blind 3-bet, and we're going to be playing cold 4-bet or fold. The small blind's been tight, but only over 16 hands, not enough to make any actual judgment about him truly being a nit. Here, I'd probably be raising up the stack off with pocket 10s or better plus ace-king. I think I'd cold 4-bet to about 21. I think I want to have about a 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluffs in my cold 4-bet range. So a hand like ace-5 suited probably doesn't need to be in there. I think I would 4-bet 10s plus ace-king to stack off with. I'd put in pocket 9s, ace-queen, and then suited broadways like ace-10 plus king-10 plus queen-jack to raise those up and then fold if I get jammed over the top. That way I've got about 50% hands that are 4-bet calling and about 50% hands that are 4-bet folding as bluffs. In some very, very wide cold 4-bet ranges, if I was ever in a spot where I was cold 4-betting 10s plus ace-king to stack off with, and I was going to have even more bluffs than value, something like a 60-40 value bet or bluff to value bet ratio, the suited wheel aces might start sneaking in there too, which is why I gave that some thought, even with the hand as weak as ace-5 suited, just because the formation is so loose, so weak, and I've got so many hands that are going to cold 4-bet and call off for value there. I can start looking for a lot of cold 4-bet bluff hands as well. I think in that spot, the suited wheel aces is starting to get a bit too loose. There's better candidates to put into the 4-bet fold range than those. But worth a thought, and it depends on your exact ratio there. I think if you're starting to mix in extra bluffs on top, you might consider using that hand, but I do think it's a bit on the loose side and not something I would truly recommend. I want to take a look at what the players had in that ace-king hand. The under-the-gun player limp called king-queen offsuit, and the isolating player, he called the isolation raise with ace-queen offsuit. So I had them both dominated, and my ace-king high was good all along. I don't love the player limping and then calling a 3-bet. I obviously hate everything about that, but we know he's a wreck. I don't think him calling the 3-bet there, especially after this guy comes along, is a great play either with a hand like ace-queen. I think he'd be better served to fold that. He may be a bit of a weaker reg, a player that gets a bit too sticky pre-flop for a bit too much money with some hands that are a bit more marginal than he realizes. But this guy we can pretty clearly say is a true recreational player there just by his, when we already knew that, we already had him tagged from his short stack and his limps. But then limping and then calling after an isolation raise and a 3-bet with a hand like king-queen offsuit is just not going to be profitable, and he's probably not a very serious player if he's doing things like that. Go ahead and tag this player too, 7844 with limps over an orbit and a half. This guy, we don't know he's a wreck based on his stats, but combined with the short stack, I think that gives it away. The short stack is the primary data point there that tells me that, at least at this stage. This guy worth keeping an eye on too, you're playing short as well with 80 blinds. Up here, just this one player a wreck, but he looks to be a pretty significant wreck. 37-0 over 20 hands with a lot of limps. So the tables look pretty good so far. Let's see if we can take advantage. Upper right-hand table, we have pocket eights under the gun, so we're going to go ahead and raise that first in. Use something like a 17-18% raised in first range from under the gun in a 6-max game. It's probably pretty appropriate, at least for the sizings that we're using, the 2.5x sizing convention. We get 3-bet by the small blind to I feel it's an appropriate size, but a larger size than some players use, a slightly larger size of 4.5x. Really no reason to defend a hand, defend this wide. This should be a pretty tight formation, small blind versus under the gun, so we're just going to go ahead and fold it. Even against an optimal opponent, I think it's probably a little too loose to call. And here, that short stack just open jams for 23 blinds. We're going to call off with ace-king suited. We're racing with fives. Fives hits the sets. We're dead in the water here. We're not turning any back doors, but it's, of course, fine to call off with ace-king against a 23 blind player open jamming. Upper right-hand table, under the gun raises first in, 2.5x. Get cold called by the recreational player in position. We've got pocket eights. We're going to be a bit tighter than typical just because of the other player, but pocket pairs are clearly good enough to call. In fact, we definitely want to be in the pot with pocket pairs against a guy like this looking to hit our set. Lower right-hand table, we get called in position on the button by a recreational player, so we check range to him on the Jack 6-2 board. He goes ahead and bets a 2/3 bet sizing. You could either check raise here, or you could check call. What I'm going to do in this spot is probably a bit atypical. I'm going to go ahead and check call because he's been aggressive. If he has the jack, he's going to keep barreling anyway most of the time if he's showing these aggressive tendencies. 83% aggression frequency thus far. Small sample, but he's just betting like crazy almost every chance he gets. Plus, it's a larger sizing, which tends to indicate more strength. I think he's going to keep betting a lot, so I'm going to check to him and give him another chance to hang himself if he's doing this with some air. Stick the money in with hands he shouldn't, as opposed to blow him off it on the flop. We're also not that deep, so I don't have to do too much to get the money in yet. Now he goes ahead and bets 11. That's going to put, let me see here. That'll give me just a little bit over pot left if I were to go ahead and check call this. Now the question is, do I check call this or check raise it? I could check raise all in for slightly over pot. I don't think he's going to fold a jack if I do that, but he probably is going to keep betting the jack on the river anyway, although diamonds, 3s, and 4s do in fact scare him away. I think I'm going to go ahead and check raise them all in at this point, not give him a chance to either outdraw me cheaply on some stupid diamond or gut shot draw. He's never going to get away from the jack at this point. The only thing that's cost me if he was going to keep stabbing the river with nonsense for a triple barrel, which sometimes that's asking a lot. He is aggressive, so he might do it. And if that board stayed drier, I think I would do it. But he's also going to overplay his top pairs like the jacks. And if that river comes an overcard, a four straight, even a flush closing river, he might get a bit cautious with his jack at that point and check it back. I don't want to give these guys a chance to get away. It's one thing to give him some rope to hang himself there on the flop, but as the board starts to show me on the turn that a lot of river cards make his marginal top pair is a lot less likely to bet and a lot less confident in their value. I think I want to hang him while I've got him still on the line. Lower left-hand table, we raised ace-10 offsuit under the gun. We get called by a recreational player in the big blind, playing a 60-some blinds deep. We'll go ahead and range bet on the 8-4-4 two-tone flop. Range bet small. Our ace high can be good here plenty of the time. Our overcards often give us hands that we can value bet or at least show down. And we can make him fold a lot on that board that doesn't coordinate with much. I may even consider bluff catching after checking back this turn. He leads into me. I think that changes the calculus some. I think that's going to be weighted a bit towards, a bit less towards just stupid overcard air type hands. I was considering checking back this turn and bluff catching even unimproved a lot of rivers just because these paired boards indicate lots of bluffs from fish. The low runouts also indicate lots of bluff from fish. He could have hand like Queen Jack that just check calls the flop because he doesn't believe me either and thinks he can hit a pair that's good and ends up having Queen High on the river and needs to bluff with it. So I could possibly have done that had he checked through on the turn. When he leads the turn, I'm just going to get out of the way and find a better spot though. Blind on blind, a 3x open is probably a little loose to defend 4-3 opposite. It's close, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and fold it. You could even arguably use that as a 3-bet because I put a few offsuit hands that aren't quite good enough to call in the 3-bet range. It's just on the cusp of what I would defend with. I'd probably call 5-4 and fold 4-3, so it's close. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise blind on blind with pocket threes. Lower left-hand table, we get a limp under the gun. We check in with 8 deuce. We actually have a double gut shot here in that we have the 3 gives us the low end of the 4 straight and the 7 gives us the high end. He bets 1. He could have all kinds of nonsense. I'm just going to go ahead and put in the check raise on him here and challenge him with it. I think I like that better than check calling. The 3 is also not that great a card for us. I'm more inclined to just check call with an open ender. That min bet doesn't necessarily signify a real strong hand. Now we turn top pair on the flush closing river and the 4 straight, or the flush closing turn and the 4 straight turn. I'm just going to go ahead and check that. I'm going to just try to check down my 8. If he's got a hand like ace 5, he's probably just going to check that back and let me show down my 8 that's good. He had 6-9, so he had top pair. He had a relatively decent hand on the flop. He had top pair. I think that real small min bet can probably signify all different sorts of pieces or just even random overcards taking a stab at it. So I don't mind putting the check raise in there based on my assessment of what that little tiny min bet means. Lower left-hand table, the middle position raises 2.5x first in. We're sitting there on the small blind. Ace-9 suited, probably a little loose to 3-bet with, especially with this guy looking on the tight side, playing 16-12 over his first 25 hands. Even against the opponent playing more optimal, I think I would probably 3-bet my suited broadways, so ace-10 or better, but not ace-9. I think I would also rather use some wheel aces with some, straight potential in there for playability post-flop. I would fold ace-9 suited, but I would 3-bet ace-10 plus and ace-5, ace-4 suited, if that makes any sense. Upper right-hand table, it's effectively middle position with one player sitting out. He raises 2.5x first in. We're in the big blind. We're going to go ahead and defend. Jack 10 is one of our weaker defends here. We'll probably defend all our offsuit broadways for this, but nothing weaker, no offsuit 9x or anything like that. So then we'll go ahead and check range on the 6-4 deuce two-tone flop. I can have all the sets here. I can have 5-3 suited. I can have 6-4. I can have 4-2. I can have various gut shots, various flush draws. I mean, I do have overcards and a backdoor flush draw, but given that I can have all those strong hands, I think I want to check raise with, I'm going to be check raising my 5-3 and my sets and my 6-4, probably even my 4 deuce. I think I would check raise all my 2 pair, and put his 1 pair overcard. He's got all the over pairs. I only have 7s and 8s for over pairs. My bigger pairs are going to be 3-bet pre-flop. But I can put his strong 1 pair hands in a bad spot by having my check raise range just be 2 pair or better, and then also some good draws, some various 5x and 3x flush draw type hands. No way to have an open ender on that board, so I'd be various combo draws for the most part would be my check raising. I can just go ahead and fold Jack 10. That might be a little bit tighter than optimal because I do have a spade in my hand, but I think it's going to be okay to fold that. 2 of these guys are going to take 2-bet advantage of me if I'm making slightly too tight of folds on the flop, and it's going to make my life easier on the later straights. Upper right-hand table, the recreational player raises 2.5x. That's his first raise first in 28 opportunities. He's on the cutoff. Because he's been so tight, I'm going to treat this like a slightly tighter formation. Rather than 3-betting something like 11%, I might go down to more like a middle position 3-bet range and raise about 8.5%. 8s plus suited broadways, ace-queen, a few wheel aces. Pocket aces, of course, a hand I'm glad to 3-bet, especially against a recreational player. This seems like a very good setup for my hand so far. Lower right-hand table, we raise the cutoff first in with ace-3 suited. We get a king-3 deuce 2-tone flop against a recreational player playing short stacked in the big blind. We'll go ahead and range bet small. Upper left-hand table, because he's so short, my 3-bet is going to be a 3-bet to get it all in against a jam or a 3-bet to fold. Pocket 8s don't really go into either of those ranges, so I'm going to go ahead and make what's going to seem to be like a tight fold, but I'm going to go ahead and lay this down. I don't want to raise it up and get it in for about 35 blinds against a player that hasn't been that loose playing under the gun. I don't want to raise fold it because there's better candidates to put into a raising range if I'm treating it almost like a 4-bet bluff situation. I'm either raising to call off a jam or raising to fold. If I'm raising to fold, if I get jammed on, I want hands that play well in the event that I'm called, and I want hands that have good blockers. So it's going to be mostly suited Broadway type cards. He only had ace-4, so perhaps he's not as reserved as I might first thought. He's just kind of playing a bit randomly. He didn't automatically have a strong hand, even though he's been fairly tight. I still think pocket 8s, it's okay to err on the side of caution and not get involved in that spot just because of the formation and the stack sizes at play. Lower right-hand table, we raise middle position first in. That same recreational player calls in the small blind. We get an ace-king-deuce 2-tone flop. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. Putting the bet in here with our ace-10. Probably looking on most runouts to just bet and get the money all in here with our reasonably strong top pair. The 7 is not a card that puts much fear in me right here. It doesn't complete any flushes, doesn't complete any straights. The only hand that really improves is pocket 7s or ace-7, king-7 type hands if he has those. I'm going to look to start betting roughly geometric pot here to get him all in with equal sizings over the turn in the river, assuming the runout cooperates with me. We'll go about 7 into 9.5. It'll make the turn pot about 23 with about 17 behind. I think that's a good sizing convention to use here. Roughly equal percentage of pot sizings on the turn in the river. If he's got something like ace-4, he's really not going to get away from this very often, if at all. If he's got flush draws, I want to charge him to come along and try to outdraw me. If he's got a king X, I want him to be in a bad spot where he's either bluff catching against my draws, or getting value towned against my, my reasonable pair of aces. I think just trying to bet and get that guy all in over those next 2 streets, assuming a run-up that's reasonably cooperative, is a straightforward and fine strategy to use. Upper left-hand table, we raise the ace-jack suited first in from middle position. We get 3-bet by a small blind. He hasn't 3-bet yet at all this session in 15 opportunities. He's been reasonably active pre-flop, but he also seems to be a slightly loose passive for a reg. That's the guy that called the 3-bet with the ace-queen, where he ISO'd and then called that large 3-bet when I had ace-king. This is probably going to be a call. It may be a bit closer. Middle position, when I'm facing a 4x 3-bet from the small blind, I really would call pretty much all the suited broadways and mid pairs and better, 6s or 7s, or something like that, or better. Even if I'm thinking this guy's a little bit tighter, I think I can still continue with the ace-jack. So it's just too strong a hand to go ahead and fold in position there with, for that sizing with all the equity I'm going to have. We get the ace-4-4 rainbow flop. He checks. I think it's fine to go ahead and check this back. I really don't want to try to get 3 straights against a hand like pocket kings or queens, or maybe if he's got an ace-10 type hand. I'm much more worried about him getting trappy with, the case aces for aces full, or a hand like ace-king that's heavily in his range. I think I can also under-rip my hand and start either inducing bluffs or getting value if he checks to me again by not betting that flop. Lower right-hand table, we limp in the big blind with a limper, actually 2 limpers, limper on the cutoff and a limper behind on the button. We have the full house, Jack, Jack 3. We're just going to go ahead and put a small bet in multi-way there, try to protect our very marginal weak full house. On the turn, effort checks to us again. I'm going to go ahead and put in a bet, thinking it's so much more likely that my ace-jack is good here. River is a lousy river in that lower right-hand table just because ace-high is the kind of hand that's going to call. I'm just going to check and hope we get to show this down against something kind of silly. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and fold. Now, he check-raises me. I just do not give this guy credit for checking twice and then bluffing. I think that's almost certainly going to be a strong hand. And as weak as it sounds to go ahead and fold this, I'm just going to go ahead and give him credit right now. I'm not looking to get a bunch of money in the spot where I'm either I'm going to be way behind his strong hands. So we'll go ahead and fold. Lower left-hand table, get a fishy limper, then a player playing slightly short but not necessarily fishy. He goes ahead and pops him up. We get a cold caller behind, another recreational player. I'm just going to go ahead and kick this up with my ace-king. Look to get some money in or get this in pre-flop right now, and I've probably got the best hand, or at least a very strong hand. That player goes ahead and calls. We get the ace-king-8 two-tone flop. My only decision here is just to jam all in for slightly more than pot or put a small bet in. I think I'm going to go ahead and go small bet and jam the turn. You could also just go ahead and just jam for a slight overbet if that was your preference. I get a 3x open from that player on the button. We're going to go ahead and defend the big blind with a hand like Queen 7 suited. That's a pretty reasonable hand to defend. Upper right-hand table, we'll raise first in from middle position with the 10-9 suited. He goes ahead and bets small. This is not a terrible hand to check raise with. It's a wide formation. He's using a small size. I really can't have 8s or 6s or 8-6, but I don't know if he actually knows that. A lot of players could have 8s or 6s here or 8-6. I would have 3-bet all those pre-flop. I can't have deuces. I've got a backdoor flush draw. I've got 3 cards to the straight that pivot. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the check raise, especially against that small bet and what appears to be a loose formation. He could probably be putting that small bet in with all kinds of hands. He goes ahead and quickly calls me, so I'm going to go ahead and shut down now and check to him on the turn. Upper right-hand table, we range bet that Queen 6-3 rainbow flop. We pick up a great card for us, the King of Spades, giving us both the flush draw and the gut shot straight. I'm going to continue betting here. I'm going to use the overbet size like I would be doing with Queen 6s, 3s. I'd probably check back my kings as a trap. I could have king, queen. I could have all kinds of various draws as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put in that overbet, looking to juice that pot up in case I hit. The river, that Queen of Spades, if it didn't close the flush, I think I might actually stab at it small, try to get some value. I'm just going to check to him here in this spot, either try to show it down free or cheap. There's some merit and try to get value. We get a slightly smaller than standard open, a 2.3x from the button. We've got ace-queen. This player's been loose and aggressive on the looser side. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet. This is pretty close between a 3-bet and the call against that size, and I'm going to go ahead and put the ace-queen into the 3-bet. I don't hate calling, though. He quickly folds. Lower left-hand table, the cutoff raises first in 2.5x. A recreational player calls in the small blind. We're going to go ahead and squeeze. This guy's been on the tight side, so I'm actually not going to squeeze as wide as I otherwise would. I'm probably more like a 7.5% range as opposed to more like a 10% range. Either way, pocket queens is a part of that, though. I'm probably going to use something like 9s plus ace-king, suited broadways, a few suited 9s, and maybe ace-5 suited. He jams over the top. Ace-queen's a little bit too tight to consider folding. If I had jacks, I think I would go ahead and fold this. I'm just going to go ahead and call off here, though. He's got pocket kings. I don't hate the way he played it. I think I would have just put in a small 4-bet instead and called off, but I don't hate the way he played it. I've got too strong a hand to do anything but just consider calling off. Even after accounting for the fact that player has been a little on the tight side so far, that ace pocket queens is too strong to fold. Take a look at that queen 7 hand. What did he defend my flop check raise with? He had ace 2 of clubs, so he had bottom pair in the backdoor club draw. So clubs coming in would have actually been poison for me, even though I still would have had a pretty strong club draw at the same time, would have ran into a better one. So I'm glad that didn't happen. Upper right-hand table, we're going to pop out of this as the fish have left. We're going to open our king 9 on the button before we leave, play our last orbit, but we are going to look to shuffle that table out and find some softer seeds now that the fish have left us. Lower left-hand table, the recreational player limps middle position. We'll go ahead and isolate the cutoff with ace-10 suited. Upper right-hand table, we're going to range bet small in the 8-5 deuce rainbow flop. We get check raise small. I would, against the small check raise there, he's really only, going a little more than half pot. I would just go ahead and defend this if I had any pair, any pocket pair, any piece of that board, any straight draw, overcards with backdoor flush draws, various gut shots. King 9 just has very little going for it, so I'm going to go ahead and fold. Lower left-hand table will range bet the 9-9-5 two-tone flop against the rec that limp called us. This guy 29-8 with 10% limps over 24 hands. I think that's good enough to tag him as a rec. Let's see where he's been V-pipping. 3 of his V-pips without raises were from the big blind, but he also has done it from the cutoff or the button. He may not be a real wacky fish, but I think I've seen enough to keep an eye on him. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table, we'll get a 3x open. We can clearly defend with a hand like ace-10 offsuit. Upper right-hand table, we raise under the gun first in with the ace-8 of spade, or ace-8 of hearts, rather, ace-8 suited. Lower right-hand table, he checks to us. We're going to go ahead and stab half pot on the ace-king deuce board. Get the 3x open from the cutoff in the upper left-hand table, and king 9 is going to be a fold in that formation, especially against that sizing. A bit closer against the 2.5x open, but I think I would still fold against the 3x. It's a clear fold. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, the recreational player limps. We are going to isolate pretty aggressively, but not necessarily with the hand as weak as 4 deuce suited. I usually, as a heuristic for figuring out what I isolate when these blind on blind limp situations come up, I do something like my button raise first in. So a low to mid 40% raise first in range, I think, or raising range is appropriate there against the blind on blind limper. Hand like 4 deuce, probably slightly outside the range of what I would open my button with or raise the blind on blind limpers. But pretty close. I guess I don't hate it if you want to do it. I would like it better against a deeper stacked opponent because we're going to be looking to make a straight or some kind of shady 2-pair to get a lot of money in, and the implied odds just aren't there when the guy's shorter. So I think I like it better against a player that's playing a more standard size stack as well. This new table over here we're starting, the stacks don't indicate any recreational players. We'll play for a couple overs and see if people are doing stupid things like limping, cold calling too much in bad spots, that kind of stuff. We just don't know until we see what these guys do in the anonymous games. So here's another player we can comfortably call a recreational player, playing on a short stack, playing 44-11 with limps over 9 hands. Upper left-hand table will raise first in middle position with King Jack offsuit. The lower left-hand table, we get a cutoff raise first in for 2.5x. We'll go ahead and pop him up with Ace Queen. Something like a 9 to 10% re-raise range. 8s plus, suited broadways, suited 9s, Ace 5 suited, Ace Queen plus. A range like that is about what I'm going to be 3-betting with here. And we'll fold against the in-position call and then the recreational player squeeze. Lower left-hand table, we get the Ace Queen or Ace 6-3 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and range bet this guy small with the Ace Queen. He calls. The turn is a jack. That's not the best card just now. Ace-Jack actually outdraws us. I was planning to continue barreling on a lot of blanks. I think I'm just going to go into more a defensive check-call type line at this point. Give him a chance to bluff with, mid-pockets or flush draw type hands. I guess he could have 5-4 at some frequency. He goes ahead and bets 23 into 33. Bets about 2/3, about 70%. There's really nothing else for me to do here but go ahead and check call this and then evaluate the river. 3 of clubs closes the backdoor flush. My kicker still plays against weaker aces, however. Aces and 3s with the queen kicker, as long as he doesn't have Ace-Jack or Ace-6 or Ace-3. Upper left-hand table is short stack 3 bets as we're just going to jam over the top with Ace-King. Get called off by 7-5, which is an okay result, even though he hit a pair on me. Our Ace-King didn't pair up, but that's okay. I'm happy to get Ace-King in for 20-some blinds against 7-5. Upper right-hand table, we raise Ace-Queen middle position. And he had pocket 7s, so he stabbed with the 7s and thought about stabbing the 7s as a bluff on the river. I think that's why it's important to have some reasonably strong hands that you start checking the turn with their out of position so you can actually defend against these guys that want to start blasting you. Upper right-hand table, we range bet small on the Queen Jack 6 flop. He quickly calls us when we get that 6 turn. I'm trying to think if I want to keep betting this hand here. I guess I've got good removal to, Ace-Queen, King-Queen. I mean, he could have the 6, but then again, so could I. I have some 6s in my range, mostly Ace-6, I suppose. I do have a lot of equity as well, so I think I want to go ahead and use my overbet here. Let's see. I think something like 12 is probably sufficient. 13. We'll go 12. Set myself up to jam favorable rivers like the 10. Put his weaker marginal hands in kind of a rough spot. If he's got a hand like Jack 9, he really should be folding automatically here. Or at least I expect the player. Let me take that back. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be folding automatically against an overbet on the turn in that spot with a hand like Jack 9. What I'm saying is I expect the player pool to fold pretty close to automatically with sort of a marginal second pair type hand in that spot that's either slightly ahead or way behind of, my value hands. You're slightly ahead of my draws. You know, I've got a hand like Ace King or King 10. It's got straight draws and overcards to pairs. You know, or I have a hand like, you know, an overpair, Ace Queen, a full house, sick hex that just is absolutely crushing those marginal bluff catchers. I think players just start letting those go against the overbet on the turn. Blind on blind, lower left-hand table. King 6 is not a hand I would call with, but I do put some hands not quite good enough to call with into my 3-bet range as bluffs, and I like using King 6 as one of those just outside the cusp of a calling range in this spot. So I'll go ahead and 3-bet with it. We get called, and we get a Jack 6 deuce two-tone flop. Go ahead and put in our range bet on the Jack 6 deuce two-tone board. We get check raised. I mean, you know, it could be various bluffs, could be various club draws, or even backdoor spade draws in his range. You know, I block pocket sixes. You could have a lot of Jack X he's doing that with as well. I just don't think the player pool check raises in these spots nearly often enough, so I'm not going to go ahead and float this. I'd be much more inclined to float if I had, you know, obviously a flush draw I'm not folding. I'd even be inclined to float with, you know, hands like King, Queen of Spades, you know, Ace, Queen of Spades, the overcards and backdoor flush draws. I think I'm just going to go ahead and fold what amounts to a reasonably marginal bluff catcher, fold on the early side, without some indication that this guy is just blasting off way too wide, and I feel like I'm just playing a guessing game at that point. So I'm just going to take the lower variance 0 EV play and go ahead and fold. Blind on blind, we raise first in with the Ace-8 offsuit. Lower left-hand table, we raised 8-7 suited in the button. The small blind goes ahead and pops us up 4.5x. We can go ahead and defend pretty liberally here against these small blind 3-bets that, for the most part, the player pool finds the necessary ones. So suited connectors are going to be almost mandatory defense in a situation like this. This table also doesn't seem to be fishy. People seem to be playing reggy and aggressive types. We're going to go ahead and shuffle it out, even though we've only played just now getting into our second orbit. Upper right-hand table, I think this guy just posted. It was a forced post more so than he limped. We'll keep an eye on that and see for sure. We check in our big blind with 10 deuce suited. Lower left-hand table, we raise first in with King Queen. Going to go ahead and stab at this multi-way pot small. It's limped. Nobody took any desire in it for the flop, so I'm going to go ahead and start trying to pick it up. Use that small bet because of the multi-way nature of the turn. We get check called. Now the river shows up a king. We actually have good removal to the nuts. We block Queen 10. I think this is actually an appropriate place to use the overbet. It's our worst 10, 10 deuce, which is one reasonable way to start picking out your overbets using the worst possible bluffs that have the worst possible, absolute value hands that have the right blockers. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my overbet and try to fold him out all kinds of nonsense like, any kind of Jack X I think is going away. A lot of Ace X is even going away against that bet. Lower right-hand table, got a recreational player limp and an isolation raise. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet the button with Ace-Queen. And it works. New table here, the big blinds playing $83 deep. 40-some blinds. Pretty safe to call him a recreational player. So we'll give this table an orbit or two to see how things shake out. This table up here with 57 hands in so far. I guess this guy's a recreational player, but his stats aren't that fishy, only his stack size. The other players are all looking pretty reggy, so I'm going to go ahead and shuffle this one out too. Keep this table with a couple of fishy type guys sitting up there. Also this guy, he's new to the table but playing short, so that's typically good enough for me to figure out he's somebody worth playing against. Lower right-hand table got a recreational player in the 3-seat, 33-10, 15% limps over 39 hands. The other players not necessarily, but at least we're only one off from direct position from a guy playing full stack that's also shown himself to be a recreational player. So that table's good enough for me for the time being to keep. This new table, we've got direct position on a half stack and a couple guys playing 30-some bucks deep. That looks pretty promising, so we're going to be pretty happy to see how these couple of orbits play out. Lower right-hand table, get that 5X open. You probably used a larger sizing because of that player posting the dead blind. Or maybe just because that's what he does. Can't say for sure. As he's playing shorter stacked, he's probably something of a recreational type player. We're not going to get involved for such a large sizing, especially not with the overcall with a hand like Ace-10 offsuit, but we are going to keep an eye on these guys as it looks to be recreational players galore all over that table. Well, he had pocket kings, so perhaps he was sizing up for a reason with strength. This guy got hand like ace-jack suited is tricky. You don't really want to 3-bet that to get that in against a guy that deep. It's tricky to have too many cold calls against that guy, even from one of the blinds with for that sizing. Hand like ace-jack suited is pretty damn strong, though, so that's kind of a tough spot to put him. And then he made top pair, top kicker. That's the deck not being too kind to that guy. But that's the way the deck goes sometimes. Lower left-hand table, we get the recreational player with about 14 blinds, min raises, and a couple of wrecks all coming along. We got pocket jacks. We're very content to go ahead and pop this up and get this in against really any of these guys that are in the pot so far. I guess if one of the blinds goes ahead and does something wacky, they can move me off these jacks. But against these guys, I'm just looking to get them in. He complies and puts the rest of his stack in here. So we're just going to call off pretty much regardless of what the other action is. That guy gets his money in here too. Let's see what this guy does. No decision left. Just call off my last 3 blinds to get in this pot against these two. We're against ace, king, and 6-3. We make top set, and then we've got top boat. Oh, and we 6-3 would have made the straight for not, but for our full house. So we go ahead and take all the money off of those two guys. He had ace king, so he was playing reasonably. The other guy with 6-3, I don't know what he was thinking, but that's why I want to get the money in against these guys when you get the chance. Small blind faces a cutoff raise first in on the upper right-hand table, a 2.5x. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet the king queen offsuit as a 3-bet. We'd have king queen, ace queen, king queen off. 7s plus suited broadways, a few suited 9s, ace-5, ace-4 suited, 10 to 11% 3-bet range. Now when that opens to 3x from middle position, we just go ahead and fold the button with king 10 offsuit. We're playing 3-bet or fold, and the hand like king 10 offsuit doesn't need to be 3-bet. There's much better candidates for it. Lower left-hand table, he limps the blind, then checks to me. I'm going to go ahead and stab with my bottom pair on the 10-6 deuce board. Can tag this guy as a recreational player also, playing 67-0 over 6 hands on a 60 blind stack. Upper left-hand table, we can just fold queen 4, the blind on blind 3x open. Lower right-hand table, we can raise ace queen suited first in from the cutoff. Upper left-hand table, we raise blind on blind with queen 7 suited. Been a nittier player over the first 50 hands. We'll go ahead and check range 201-644. Upper right-hand table, 9s is a raise first in from middle position. He checks back the flop. We make top pair on the turn. Queen peels on the turn. We're going to go ahead and start jabbing at this pot small. Probably pretty much all our range here against a tighter nitty player that didn't bet the flop. He goes ahead and calls us. Now, he might have a queen. I actually think, even though I normally would try to sort of make a value bet with this hand, try to get called down, I think this guy, if he has some kind of middling pocket pair, even a 6x hand, I think those are much more inclined to bet the flop. I think I'm better off actually trying to get him to stab with some goofy ace high or misdraw type hands. I'm going to go ahead and check to him. Lower right hand or upper right hand table, go ahead and range bet small on the 7-6-5 two-tone flop. We get quickly check called. The turn is the 5 of spades, putting a second flush draw out there. We're going to go ahead and use an overbet or check range. I have 8-9 here for middle position. I've got all the sets. I also block 8-9, so I actually kind of like betting a hand like 9s or pocket 8s a bit better than a hand like 10 or jacks. So I'm going to go ahead and bet the 9s. Depending on the river, I may just be checking back a lot, but I want to go ahead and get another bet in, try to get some value from all sorts of pair plus draw or flush draw type hands that are out there. Upper left-hand table, we raise the cutoff with ace-4 suited. Lower right-hand table, we're facing a 3x open from what's effectively middle position. We're rolling the big blind. I'm just going to go ahead and fold that. I had this guy as fishy, but he's actually not showing himself to be that fishy. He got money in with the pocket kings. He's not really cold calling too much pre-flop. He hasn't limped. I'm going to go ahead and pull that fish tag off of him unless he shows me that he earns it. He was playing short earlier, and he is playing a bit aggressive. Maybe I should sort of give like a little warning sign, draw my attention to him, but he's not a confirmed full-blown fish. Let's see here. Upper left-hand table, we get a button 3-bet versus the cutoff raise first in. Normally I'd be 4-bet calling with jacks or 10s and better plus ace-king and using a few wheel aces as my bluffs. Given this guy's been so passive, no 3-bets in 17 attempts, I'm going to deviate a bit tighter, and I'm not going to be stacking up with my jacks or 10s against this guy. I'm going to be 4-bet calling queens plus ace-king and having less 4-bet bluffs in there as well. So these wheel aces, well, they would be standard against an appropriately aggressive player as a 4-bet bluff. They are going to drop out. So I am going to use his tightness against him and not put money in with the hand that week when otherwise I would if a player was appropriately aggressive. Timed out by accident while talking about the hand. I think Jack-10 would have been a weakish defend there in that situation against the middle position open. Not the end of the world that I'm not in that pot. It's pretty marginal to begin with. I'll fold a few offsuit aces from the button, even if he was completely on open pot. So I'll dump maybe ace deuce, ace 3. They're pretty close, though. Opening them is not exactly the worst thing in the world. Upper right-hand table, we raise the cutoff first in with the ace-jack. Very standard hand to put in a 27-28% cutoff raise first in range. Going to go ahead and tag this guy's a recreational player playing 30-some blinds deep. This guy's also a suspected rec. I could continuation bet to some extent on this board, even multi-way, assuming that it checks to me. I think I'd much rather do so with a club in my hand, sort of split my gut shots that way. I'm going to go ahead and check this one back, but betting's not too bad. I think I would just prefer to split that way instead. If they keep checking the turn, I may go ahead and start stabbing at that point. When this guy goes ahead and bets out a pretty good size amount multi-way, then he goes ahead and gets raised up on top of that. It's a very easy fold with my ace-jack with no other draws to go with it, without the flush draw to help me make some other decision. Just going to go ahead and fold my gut shot on that spot. Upper left-hand table, recreational player raises 2.5x from the button. He's been pretty tight so far. He's only raised about 10% of the opportunities, 5 out of 52. That said, ace-7 is pretty much a defense regardless of the formation, and pretty much, at least for that size and for a lot of other sizes, not going to be a 3-bet, just going to be a call from the big blind. I'm just going to go ahead and call this and check range to him on the king-queen 3 flop. Noticing that he's a tight player is more for more marginal defenses in the big blind, but a hand like ace-7 is going to be pretty straightforward. We'll go ahead and jab small on that ace of hearts, flush closing turn that gives us a weak top pair. We have a recreational player that calls our isolation raise over the limper, not the limper himself, but a different player. And then he donks into a small on jack 4 deuce 2-tone. We have top pair. We'll just call that and evaluate the turn. Now that we have the 4 heart out there, and with the king, I think I'm just going to try to check this down, and it's close between a bluff and a check. I think I'm just going to go ahead and try to check it down, though. I don't hate just blasting pot, try to fold them off. Some other ace or some kind of weak heart. And with this fish donking into me multiple times for small amounts, and we've got top pair, I'm just going to go ahead and keep calling down. Now he goes and checks. Trying to think if there's any merit to value betting this guy with my weak jack. I mean, he could have some kind of weird trip twos that he shuts down with and tries to trap me with on the river. His flush draws aren't going to call, and a lot of his jacks beat me. This one might be a little too thin to value bet. I guess if I thought he was more pocket pair heavy that would get suspicious and call down with, I could go ahead and value bet, but I'm just going to go ahead and check this one back. He did have pocket eights. Maybe he calls, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I think that one's pretty close. I'd like to get value bets in, and that one just felt a little bit too thin to me. Got a cutoff raise first in for a min raise, and then the button calls. I'm in the big blind facing the min raise with a hand like jack 5. I get a lot tighter multi-way because the price is so good. Suited cards are mostly going to be called here, including a hand like jack 5. I'll go ahead and check the range on the 8-6-4 2-tone flop. Pre-flop raiser also checks. It goes to the button. Button checks back as well. We get the 9 that closes the flush, which makes our flush. I'm going to go ahead and start betting for value using the small size for multi-way. 1/3 pot. The cutoff player who raised first in instantly folds, as does the button. Apparently no one had much of any a piece of that, and we take it down. Upper left-hand table, we raise the cutoff first in with king-queen offsuit. Very standard part of our 27 to 28-ish% raise first in range. We get 3-bet in position, about 3x. I don't really want to be calling with out of position with too many offsuit type hands. Even ace-queen, I think I'd mostly be using as a 4-bet bluff. Hand like king-queen, I think is going to be okay to just go ahead and fold here. Be more inclined to call with a hand like jack 10 suited, queen 10 suited, or even some low suited connectors to give me some low end board coverage as opposed to a hand like king queen offsuit. I think it's okay to make a mature, disciplined fold in a spot like that. Lower right-hand table, get a 3x open, blind on blind. For a 3x open, I defend almost every suited combo, and I tend to dump a couple of them, 7 deuce suited being one of them, so I'll go ahead and fold this. It's pretty close. If you think the guy is too loose pre-flop or too exploitable post-flop from calling in, if you call him in position, you want to go ahead and defend all your suited combos, including 7 deuce. I don't have a problem with that. It is pretty close. tag this guy as a wreck also, playing 54-17 limps on 28 blind stack. I think that's evidence enough right there. Upper right-hand table, we raise first in with the sixes on the button. Upper left-hand table, we'll check range on the king, queen, queen flop after we checked in our big blind against a button limper. He checks back. We're going to go ahead and start jabbing at this pot small out of position. We do have third pair. Upper right-hand table, we'll range bet the 10-9 deuce, two-tone flop, range bet it small. Now he goes ahead and calls us. On the 4 straight runner, I think I want to turn this into a bluff. Try to fold him off like a king or some kind of better 10. Turn on the upper right-hand table is a 9 that pairs second pair, so he snap folds kings face up, and our pot size bet works as a bluff. We'll go ahead and check back. Bluff catching a lot of, not necessarily a lot, but several rivers with that 10 high board if it stays low. He bets 2/3 into me. Trying to think what we should make of this. A 2/3 bet from a fish that calls out of position is not necessarily too strong. It tends to be overbluffed. Let's see here. The check call check bet line is also a bit overbluffed. The ace river is fairly neutral. The paired turn tends to be overbluffed. We've got decent pot odds. We're going to go ahead and call this, try to snap off some kind of bluff, some kind of misdraw. And he actually has a worse pocket pair. That's why it's good to think about these river spots and sort of assess bet sizing, board texture, the line that got us there, even to some extent the bet size in the earlier streets that got us there. And also know that you don't have to be right all that often to justify these calls. Even a pot size bet only has to be good 1 time out of 3 to be profitable. A less than pot size bet starts going, your success rate that's required to have it be break even or profitable starts, you can be wrong a lot more often as the bet sizing goes down. So it's probably good to look these guys up, especially since recreational players have so much nonsense in their range at every part of the game tree that they just end up with BS they shouldn't have, and they make mistakes and put hands in the lines they shouldn't put them in the first place. So it's hard to fold when you have some showdown value if there's reason to think a guy could be bluffy, and the odds are pretty good. Lower left-hand table, 2x open from the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and defend for a flat with ace-jack offsuit. And check range, we get a jack-10-8 two-tone flop. Very coordinated. We've got top pair, top kicker, and the backdoor nut flush draw. Turn is the king. We no longer have top pair, which is unfortunate. Our hand is still pretty strong. We also now have the gut shot to the Broadway straight on a queen. We're going to go ahead and jab out small at this after he checks back the flop. Upper right-hand table, we're going to raise first in from under the gun, 6-max under the gun with jack-10 suited. Now he raises me up. I think if I've got a hand like any king X, especially king X that coordinates with that board with either 2 pair or some kind of straight draw, I continue. I think the jack I can just go ahead and fold. There's probably a lot of king X that's just looking to get cheap showdown. Forced draws into pain, more money on that turn. Although it's reasonably assumptive what I'm saying there. I don't truly know what that guy's range is, but I do know that the player pool doesn't really raise enough in that line or raise the small bet nearly often enough. So when I do get raised, I can go ahead and make snugger folds than I otherwise would. Button raises first in 2.5x. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet ace-jack. Probably a 14-ish% 3-bet range here. Ace-jack plus, king-queen, pocket 8s plus, suited connectors 5-4 suited and better, suited broadways, suited 9s, a few wheel aces, a few suited 8s rather. Give you about 14%. I'll go ahead and range bet small on the queen 10-10 two-tone flop. He calls me. Queen is an interesting turn, and now that we have the nut no pair and all his under pairs like 9s and worse no longer even beat us, I'm going to go ahead and start checking this. I think I'd be checking basically everything. Queens are more inclined to want to trap and pick off bluffs, I think. 10x doesn't really want to value bet. Now he goes ahead and starts betting. He's pretty aggressive. He's been pretty loose, pretty aggressive, as far as his button goes. I'm trying to think if there's merit in putting this hand into a call down line. I'm thinking about how I want to approach this. Regs are not that bluffy in the call bet line. It's pretty neutral. I think I'm just going to go ahead and fold. I can certainly have Queen X. I can have my quads, quad queens, quad tens, my queens full. I can even have 10X that make bluff catchers. I can still have aces or kings that are better call downs than ace high. You know, or pocket jacks even is a bluff catcher. And given that I'm more it's going to be checking range on that turn, I can still have all those combos. I think it's okay to be a bit on the tight side and just not risk getting value down when he can have all sorts of queens in his range too. It's a bit nitty, but it's okay to be a bit nitty if you're not quite sure that it merits calling down for your stack. And if I check call there, I've got to check call pretty much any river, and if I'm behind, I'm dead in the water. So I don't think I'm giving up a ton of value if I'm passing up on a bluff catch spot there. I'm not even sure it's a spot worth bluff catching. I'd much rather protect my checking range by checking my entire range on that double board pairing turn and just being able to trap with my quads and my queens full and probably my tens full. Upper right hand table, we're going to raise Jack 7 suited from the cutoff. This table's starting to get pretty marginal. Only one rec. His stats aren't all that terrible, and he's playing short. Nobody else all too terribly weak, so we're going to go ahead and get out of this one. Upper left-hand table, 2.5x open from under the gun. Go ahead and 3-bet that. It's pretty standard. This guy's a bit fishy, but not necessarily significantly tighter than the regs. If we get a bit tighter, maybe I'll dump ace-4 out of my 3-bet range, but keep ace-5 if I want to deviate ever so slightly tighter. Lower left-hand table, get a 3x open from the button. You can go ahead and fold ace-7 offsuit, kind of on the cusp, although this guy's also been nitty and passive. It's only his second raise in his 15 attempts. Opportunities. And against the cold 4-bet, we just go ahead and, or against the 4-bet from that under the gun player, rather, not a cold 4-bet, we're just going to go ahead and fold the ace-5. No obvious weak player at that table based on stack size, so we'll look for another one. He's limped 4 times, so that's probably pretty telling. He's also got a very wide gap between VPIP and pre-flop raise. 4 of them for the small blind, 5 from the big blind. A couple times from middle position, once from the cutoff, a few times from the button. So he's got cold calls all over in every formation for the most part. He's also limping enough to know that it's not a fluke. Not the biggest fish stats I've ever seen, but enough to indicate he's probably on the weak side. Upper left-hand table, we raise aces under the gun, part of an 18-ish% raise first in range. We get 3-bet in position, slightly over 3x from a reg-type player. In a spot like this, I think the only move is just really to 4-bet and call off with queens plus ace-king and maybe use ace-queen offsuit as my bluffing combos. Go ahead and put in a roughly 2.7x size out of position 4-bet. He goes ahead and calls the 4-bet. That's not the best flop in a 4-bet pot for the aces, but we do also have ace-queen offsuit. Our bluff became the nuts, and we have pocket kings. I'm going to go ahead and put in my small range bet. And he goes ahead and snap folds, so I wonder if he had a smaller pocket pair. He's obviously not folding tens or jacks or kings. I don't really think he has ace-king there very much. He's not folding ace-queen if he floats with that. Must have floated me with a smaller pair. Lower left-hand table, we get a couple of reks limping in position, and the small blind completes. We're going to go ahead and isolate raise up 150% of pot with the ace-10 suited. Fold, fold for the in-position limpers. I'll assume the small blind, who seems like more of a regular type, is going to fold out as well, although we'll see if he actually does. And he does. I'm looking for a table with some short stacks. Not finding it quite yet, but I'm comfortable they're out there just because they've been all over the pool this session. Upper right-hand table, we get a cutoff min raise. We're on the big blind. Going to go ahead and defend with pretty much all of our suited cards. Might pop up a couple of them, like some of the better suited connectors, or maybe ace-5 suited. We'll defend for a call with 8-10 suited. Lower right-hand table, we'll isolate raise the limper on the button with 6-5 suited towards the bottom of our ISO range, but I think it's okay to do it here. I also like that he was a bit deeper, but I think it's still okay. Upper right-hand table, we've got a bottom two pair on queen 10-8. I think I'd rather just play this a bit more passively and check call it. I'd much rather check raise stronger hands. I mean, I could have all my 9-10 there. Or I'm sorry, all my Jack-9 offsuit combos. The suited ones might be 3-bet pre-flop, or they could be called. Could go either way. I've also got a set of 8s. I wouldn't really 3-bet that pre-flop. Bottom two pair, especially now having picked up that backdoor diamond draw, I'm content to continue calling. There's not all that many rivers that are bad for my hand. My hand is still under-repped and reasonably strong. Go ahead and check call him again. Now that I made a boat, that's a very strong hand. I'm going to check to him, keep playing in flow, and see if he wants to stab at me again. He probably shuts down if he's got a queen X value hand, which is the only downside of playing that way. A hand like king queen probably is content to check back. He had queen 7, so he had a weak queen. No real reason to continue value betting after he did that twice on that coordinated board and the middle pair paired up. You know, I could have hands like Jack 10, 10, 9, second pair and gut shots that just aren't going to fold to that second barrel. You know, in addition to the sort of backdoor 10 flush draws, or the hand I had bottom two pair that ended up filling up and making a boat. So I think his check back is okay. Although I think the way that I played it is pretty reasonable as well too. I think check raising there might be a bit on the flop is a bit of an overplay for a hand like that with the board that coordinated when you've only got bottom two. I also really can't have queens or tens, as those would have been 3-bet pre-flop. So he's a bit more heavy on the nuts in his range than I am, as he can have all the sets, and he can have Jack-9 suited and probably Jack-9 offsuit as well. I've got Jack-9 offsuit. Jack-9 suited, I think I'm going to 3-bet pre-flop. So some of my best combos are taken away. You know, then I've got hands like the bottom two pair. I guess I've got my combos of queen 10 for the most part. For the most part, those are all called pre-flop, and queen 8 as well. So I've got lots of hands that are pretty good to call dom with, but I'm a little outgunned when it comes to the actual nut type hands, the sets and the straights. You know, he's got the top two sets and I do not. He might have all the straights if he's playing Jack 10 in there for a Jack 9 offsuit for the min raise, where some of my Jack 9 is going to be 3-bet pre-flop. Upper right hand table, I'm going to raise first in on the cutoff with 10-7 suited. And we get 3-bet by the small blind up to a 4x size. We can just go ahead and fold this, even if he's playing like in solver, playing optimally 10-7 suited. It's a bit loose to defend the 3-bet with. against the player pool that misses some of their 3-bets and doesn't play quite aggressively enough in a lot of formations, including that one, I think it's okay to just go ahead and fold that. No reason to get involved. Lower right-hand table, recreational player limps to cutoff. The button, another rec, limps behind. I'll content to complete my small blind with the suited connector. Hope the big blind lets us sneak in here for free, or just about for free for a half blind. He does get a 9-7 deuce two-tone flop. We have a gut shot to the low end of the straight. Probably not going to get too involved here, but worth taking a look at. New table, lower left-hand table, a presumed recreational player, open limps middle position, so we go ahead and complete the small blind with pocket fives. Now we're going to check range out of position to 2 players on the ace-4-4 two-tone flop. Now even though I've got a gut shot to the straight, it's a gut shot to the low end. These multi-way pots, if I'm going to start getting involved, I want my draws to be very robust to nut-type hands, not second-best hands. So it's going to be very trivial to just go ahead and fold a hand like 8-7 here. Upper right-hand table, we've got a middle position raises 2.5x. We're sitting on Jack-10 suited in the big blind. We're going to defend this. I'm trying to decide if I want to 3-bet it or call it. I think 3-bet's probably a little bit better. Probably 3-bet 7.5% or so of hands, 9s plus suited broadways, ace-king offsuit, maybe a couple suited 9s and ace-5 suited, something like that. Upper left-hand table, we're going to raise first in on the button with ace-5. And the player that was a suspected wreck had queen-9 offsuit, and he called a couple of barrels there post-flop with the ace out there. The fact that he's limping queen-9 is really what gives away that he's a wreck. The call down is pretty justifiable, especially since I'm going to be going pretty ham, stabbing at those pots that nobody seems to want a piece of. And when I get him down to heads up on the river, I'm definitely not giving up with my 5s that have very little showdown value, trying to get him to fold that 9, or if he backed into a queen. Could maybe consider overbetting that because I've got good removal to the best 4, or the most likely 4, at least 5-4. And I don't know how likely a guy like that is going to be to start folding his pairs, his non-ace pairs. The problem with an overbet bluff in that spot is that I think he limps a lot of ace-x, and I also think that he's not going to be too willing to let the ace-x go in that line, even if I start sizing up. I think sizing up is good against a player that's a presumed fish if I happen to have a boat or trips or something like that, a super strong hand where I want the ace to pay me off a lot. I think trying to get a recreational player to fold an ace on that board after he limps all sorts of crazy ace-x in, which can make up a significant portion of his range, and then try to get him to fold it after a small turn jab and then a river bet, even a river overbet, might be a bit ambitious. I think those guys probably don't adjust to that overbet sizing enough, and they probably get too married to their random ace-x and pay you off. So I don't think an overbet's a great bluff against that guy right there, but I'm not sure that this is backed up by hard data. This is me trying to reason through if it makes sense or not based on what I think I've seen. So this may not be accurate. This is just these are my feelings. These are not hard data, and I prefer hard data whenever possible. Lower left-hand table, we raise the ace-4 suited in middle position, get cold calls all over the place. Probably some wrecks at this table. We're pretty sure this guy is. This guy's playing short as well. This guy's cold calling the cutoff. I'm suspicious any of them are very serious players. Upper right-hand table, we raise first in from under the gun with ace-jack suited, get cold called by another suspected wreck in position, playing 53-39 over 18 hands on a short stack. Upper left-hand table, we raise first in with the jacks from under the gun. Lower left-hand table with stabs and no real piece of this. And multi-way, we're just going away. Upper right-hand table, we're going to check range to a player in position to us in this multi-way pot. We do have second pair top kicker. Now we just made aces up on a coordinated Broadway board. We're going to start stabbing at this board pretty widely and pretty merged as well. Probably stabbing all kinds of stuff in our range here. We're using the small size because of the multi-way nature, so I can get away with using all kinds of bets. They both folded very quickly, probably had very little piece of that board to fold for the small sizing. But I like that better than checking and letting guys peel stupid stuff for free. And I like using that small size multi-way. Is it just the small sizing works better because even though any one player only has so much responsibility to defend against the small size, the multi-way players, that defense is shared between the players in the multi-way pot. And the math just works out a lot better to use small sizes when you're multi-way. Under the gun, looks like that's a limp. Recreational player completes. We'll check in with the Jack-10 offsuit on the big blind. Lower left-hand table, we raised ace-9 suited under the gun. We get folds all around. Upper left-hand table, middle position raises first in. King-9 is probably a bit too loose to 3-bet with, and we're not going to be cold calling pretty much of anything in that spot. We get a pot lead from the small blind. They completed an ace-3-3. We've got no real piece of that, so we're just going to get out of the way, especially multi-way. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps middle position. We're happy to isolate him on the button with, a low to mid 20% range, or maybe as wide as my entire cutoff range. Somewhere in the low to mid or upper 20%. I'll put King-10 offsuit in there. I'm not sure exactly how wide I want to go, but I think, as wide as the cutoff raise first in range or a bit tighter is probably appropriate. He just goes ahead and limp folds. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind. We're going to raise first in with our Jack-7 suited. Lower right-hand table, we get a cutoff raise first in. We're on the button with pocket eights. I guess that 2.5x 3-bet. We're going to 3-bet pretty aggressively using a 3-bet or full strategy, roughly 13% of our range. We're going to include pocket eights. Probably pocket 7s are better, ace-jack plus, king-queen. Suited Broadway, suited 9x, and the suited wheel aces gets us to about 13%. I think that's a pretty appropriate range to use here. And we take it down. If you are doing some button split stuff, I don't know that it's even necessary until you start getting to very low rate games, and even then it may not even add all that much value to your strategy. To me, it's a lot simpler to play a linear 3-bet or fold strategy, even on the button. Rather than start worrying about how I defend against guys squeezing behind me and all that kind of stuff and in range splitting. If you are going to start doing that kind of stuff, pocket eights probably is a very fine hand to call in position as opposed to 3-betting. Personally, I prefer just a 3-bet or fold strategy. I think it makes your life a lot easier and doesn't really give up very much value, even if guys are playing against you perfectly. But that's a matter of personal preference. I could certainly have people go to a different philosophical approach than that, and I really can't argue that they're wrong. If anything, it is more correct to have cold calls on the button. I just think it's easier to not do so. And I just don't think it gives up enough to justify the extra complexity of the strategy that makes it harder to play. Interesting spot here. We get a fishy player that's been pretty aggressive with his 3-bets. He goes and 3-bets me small out of position, about a 3x 3-bet out of position. I was trying to decide if I wanted to jam over the guy or cold call. However, when the button goes in cold 4-bets against a guy who's too small to have any 4-bet folds, I'm willing to bet that that is a very value-stacked range. My pocket 10s do not want to jam into that. I think I was even just going to flat against this guy and sort of, play for stacks on very favorable flops. And go ahead and fold now against the cold 4-bet. More interesting would be if I got to play this guy had this guy just folded and I got to play against the fish. I think if the fish goes ahead and makes that 3-bet larger where my 4-bet jam over the top picks up more money, I think there's more merit to raising over the guy in that spot. Against the smaller size, because I'm not as rewarded for picking up the pot when I jam over him, I think I'm more inclined to call there, especially with the odds being better. He's been pretty loose and aggressive. He's 3-bet 3 times out of 9. He's playing 52-35 over 24 hands. He's probably kind of spazzy and aggressive. So my 10s are probably good. I think I just fold them off to build the bullshit that I beat by jamming over the top there instead. Lower left-hand table, we had a player, he looks like he open limped. I isolated him up, and we get called out of the blind by a recreational player. We flop trips on the Jack-Jack-9 two-tone board. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my small range bet. Hope to get some action here with my very strong trip hand. It's a very safe turn card. It puts a double flush draw out there. The backdoor flush draw comes in. I'm going to go ahead and use an overbet size. Let me see here. I think 1.5x is probably a bit too much in this. I think I'll go to about 18. Yeah, and that'll leave us about 70-ish effective and do a pot of about 50. I think that's appropriate sizings. If my 1.5x, my 150% of pot turnover bet's gonna leave me where they don't have nearly as much as that left behind them on the river, I'll start sizing the overbets down and try to bet roughly more geometrically, so my turn and river bets are roughly equivalent sizes of the pot for getting the guy all in. I don't know that it makes a huge difference, but it seems to probably be a little bit more correct to me, at least from a theoretical standpoint. I don't need to overbet the turn to leave less than, like a pot size bet left on the river. I want to keep those sizings a bit more in balance. Upper left-hand table, we raise first in on the cutoff with pocket kings, very clearly a part of our 27-28-ish% range. Small blind player goes ahead and 3-bets us pretty quickly to 4x. Let me see here. Against a reg, my 4-bet range is probably just going to be kings plus ace king suited with some bluffs mixed in, maybe pocket queens as well. But ace king is clearly going to be a part of that. Let's say I'm using king king ace king suited, maybe ace queen offsuit as a bluff. I'll go ahead and take that down. He folds back out pretty quickly. Lower left-hand table, we've got a poster behind us. We're under the gun. We're going to raise first in with our standard under the gun range, but add an extra blind to account for the poster that's out there. So we'll go about 3.5x instead of a standard 2.5x open. We have bottom pair in a weak backdoor flush draw, multi-way pot, all these guys getting involved. I think it's okay to just get out a bit early. You could call that as well. I don't hate it, but I'm just going to go ahead and fold that one. We're in a check range for that poster that calls us in position. We get the ace-8 deuce two-tone board. He quickly checks back. 5 of club comes out that closes the flush and also gives us the nut flush draw. I'm going to go ahead and jab at this pot small like I would do with a lot, if not all of my range in this spot. And he goes ahead and quickly folds out. Recreational player, he goes ahead and open limps middle position. I'm going to go ahead and tag him as a rec at this point. The automatic posting was just a glitch of the Bovada software, but open limping tells me he's doing that on purpose. The small blind completes behind. I'm going to go ahead and isolate him up with pocket 8s or better, suited 9s or better, ace 10 plus, king jack plus type hands. He goes ahead and calls me on a queen 9 deuce rainbow flop. I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet after isolating from the blinds. He seems like a very fit or fold type player. He instantly folded. He instantly checked back that last hand, the ace high flop, and he instantly folded against my small bet on the turn. Looks like he's almost using the automatically fold to any bet checkbox button. He folded so damn fast. Upper left-hand table, it looks like a reg-type player min raises under the gun. He's playing 28-20 over 41 hands with, aggressive but a reasonable amount of 3-bets. Against that 2x open, I'm going to go ahead and call most, if not all, my suited cards, including 5-9 suited. We get a jack 8-4 two-tone flop. We do have the heart draw. He goes ahead and bets small. I think in this formation, the check raise is not quite as profitable. I think I don't want to also pile in a bunch of money with a flush draw that's on the lower end. When that flush comes in, it's not necessarily automatically good. I'm going to go ahead and check call this. I'd rather be check raising with gut shots to the nuts like 6-7, hands like 9-10 for open-ended straight draw. Maybe in a hand like trying to think what overcards. I guess I might have some ace queen or king queen suited. Those make some flying flop check raises because when the hearts come in, they're pretty good. Now we pick up a gut shot as well with that 6 coming out there. The 5 gives us a gut shot, or the 7 gives us a gut shot, rather. Now he goes and checks back. Deuce is the deuce of hearts. Flush closing river makes our flush. We want to go ahead and value bet. If we happen to have the nut flush here, I might think of using some over bets just because that's a very strong hand that beats everything. With the smaller flush, I want a bit more reasonable, give me a chance to get called by a lot of stuff that I beat. In most of my value bets and bluff hands are going to go on that smaller size and on the flush closing river. You know, it's pretty much only going to be nuts and nut flushes and nut flush blockers in an overbet range. Though I do think an overbet range there in the flush closing river and that the way that line played out is pretty reasonable. But specifically with nut flushes and nut flush blockers. Button 2.5x open, the lower right-hand table. His first hand he's played, but only through one orbiter, so not enough to dictate anything about him. He is using a regular type sizing and regular type stack size. We're going to just treat him like a regular type player. We're going to go ahead and defend Queen-Jack offsuit against the 2.5x open from the button out of our big blind, which is a pretty standard defense as a call. He bets small, about a third or 30% or so of pot. I think I would be check raising here. I mean, I could have 4s. I could have 7-4 suited. I could have ace-7 and ace-4 offsuit. Ace-7 suited as well. 7s and aces, I really 3-bet pre-flop, although he probably doesn't know that I 3-bet the 7s. That could certainly be in a calling range. I guess I would have some check raises here, but I think I'd rather be check raising some straight draw type hands as opposed to Queen-Jack. Queen-Jack's entering my thought process because it blocks a lot of the ace-high, top pair type hands that are going to heavily make up his range that call down both ace-jack and ace-queen. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and fold this and prioritize my check raise bluffs to be in hands that can draw to nuts. We get 3-bet. We get 3-bet by the aggressive, fishy, short stack type player and then overcalled by this player behind me. I'm trying to decide if I want to 4-bet this to get in against the fish. I think I want to do that and try to force this other player out. Let me see here. I'm going to kick him up to about 26, try to get the money against this guy and try to force this guy out. Using a slightly smaller sizer than I otherwise would out of position because this guy's range still might be kind of uncapped. And against him, I'm just going to be calling off here the 35 blinds against the fish that's been wacky and aggressive. He shows me a better hand, so be it. He showed me queens, but I'm not folding jacks to 35 blinds to a guy that's been loose, wacky, and aggressive pre-flop. If you can pick up a better hand, go ahead and show it to me, especially that shallow. Hell, even if he was playing more standard that shallow, I'm not getting away from jack. So that's just kind of an unfortunate setup, if you ask me. But I'm content playing the jacks that way, and congratulations. Now you have 75 blinds to dust off instead of 37. So kudos to you, sir. And I am shutting the session down in a few minutes, so hopefully I get a chance to tangle with him a bit more before I bow out. But if not, I'll get him next time. Lower left-hand table, we get a couple of Rex limping. The small blind, I isolate here, not too aggressively, probably about 13%. My cutoff is usually pocket 8s, so I'm going to limp in and complete in with the pocket 7s instead. And check range multi-way on the 9-deuce-3 board. Upper right-hand table, get a 2x open from a reg-type player in the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and defend the ace-5 offsuit for the min-raise, and we're going to check range 2 in the jack-5-5 two-tone flop. Lower right-hand table, we raise jack-9 offsuit on the button. We go ahead and get we got a c-bet of half pot over here. We're going to fold the 7s against the bet and the raise in the lower left-hand table. We're going to go ahead and raise our trips top kicker. I'm going to use the pot size check raise because I'm really only doing this with good 5x type hands and some draws, probably some good flush draws or some maybe like a hand like 6-7 for a flush draw that's also got blockers to the 5x and has backdoor straight draws. He quickly calls. I'm going to go ahead and start betting roughly geometric, trying to get this in at this point. Let me see here. If I go 20, that's going to put 64 out there on the river with 63 behind. A little bit larger than that. Let's go 21. Lower right-hand table will range bet on the Queen 8-7 two-tone flop. He snap calls. The only hand I'm really worried about is 5-4 or Jack's full. He's going to call me down with, some Jack X. Worst fives, just going to go ahead and jam this all in, continue with my plan I had all along, and try to get value from my top trips. He calls me down and he mucks. Lower left-hand or lower right-hand table, we get check raised, reasonably small. I would float this if the guy had enough money to pay me off should my 10 hit for the nuts. Because he's so shallow, I'm not going to continue. I'm just going to give him credit and go ahead and fold out. He had pocket queens, so I guess if he thinks I'm doing that with the jack, he's even got some domination over my value range. Given that the way you heard me approach that, I said I'm not doing that with jacks. I'm doing that with good 5x and hands that have some draw potential and blockers to 5x. So I'm, that said, if he thinks I can be check raising and barreling off there with some bluffs, that's also a pretty reasonable bluff catcher. I don't know. I don't know that I'm truly going to check raise and barrel off there. I'm not giving up rivers too often, but in that check raise barrel off line where it's pretty marginal, the pool doesn't really overfold as badly as they do in a lot of other river spots. I might not barrel off there. That's the one spot where I may just surrender. I figure I've got my money's worth both my flop check raise, and if I have equity, I'm going to keep blasting the turn. And if I check raise the flop with equity or backdoor equity and then barrel the turn, either continuing to have or having picked up equity, and I just get called and my equity doesn't come in, that's one spot where I might just surrender and say I got my money's worth, I barrel with my equity, I get these folds plenty of times on the earlier streets, and I'm just not going to make a marginal river shove right there. That said, he has no way of knowing my exact strategy or what I'm doing there, and I'm not even guaranteeing I don't blast off the river sometimes. I don't know that his queen's call off is necessarily terrible. I think it's understandable and defensible, and it's probably what you're supposed to do in solver world at equilibrium. Either way, I'm happy I got a stack there and on the back end of this session. Upper left-hand table, we raised the pocket threes first in under the gun. Lower left-hand table, we raised the ace-queen offsuit first in under the gun. I'm going to check range on the upper left-hand table. He checks back. The turn is our gin card, 3, giving us a set. We're going to start jabbing at that pot on the turn. Lower left-hand table, we're going to check range to the rec that calls in position on 8-7-5. We're going to fold against the cutoff, raise first in for 3.5x on the button with our jack-8 suited. Upper left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and use the overbet just because the pocket threes is well concealed, doesn't block any of his called-on range like Queen X, Jack X type things. And it just may look kind of bluffy as well on that line because why wouldn't I bet the flop or bet the turn larger if I had a real hand? So I think this is a good spot to go ahead and use the overbet. He folds pretty quickly, so it didn't work out, but I like trying to get value when I have strong hands that are concealed and don't block the kind of stuff that Hero calls me down. Get a 3x open from a sort of passive recreational player on the button. I'm going to treat this more like a middle position open, like he's open in 20-some%, which is probably pretty accurate. However, I still do 3-bet ace-4 suited in that spot, probably about an 8% 3-bet range. So even though I am deviating tighter, I am still keeping some of the weaker 3-bets in the range against the guy. Upper right-hand table, we raise first in with ace-king in middle position. Big blind calls and checks to us on king-9 deuce two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small. Got a 3x open from under the gun. We're in the small blind with pocket tens. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet pretty tight because of the 3x open under the gun, as the 3x open should indicate a tighter range from him as well. We're going to 3-bet something like 9s plus, ace-queen plus, ace-10 suited plus, king-jack suited plus for about a 6-6.5% range. But we are going to keep pocket tens in there, but not in love with this hand if he starts playing back at us pretty heavy here. However, he just folds pretty quickly and easily at the same time, so. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise first in on the button with queen 3 suited. And after this orbit, I'm going to go ahead and start shutting the tables down. I'll let the big blind get to me on this one and probably this one as well. And click and check my sit out boxes from there. Upper right-hand table, a rec limps blind on blind. We're going to isolate him with a 40-ish% range, similar to our button raise first in range. Jack 10 suited, very clearly a part of that. Then he quickly folds. Get a min raise from middle position. We're in the small blind with pocket kings. A tightish recreational player goes ahead in 3-bets. I'm going to play cold 4-bet or fold. I'm going to be using pocket queens or better as my stack-off hands along with ace-king, and probably a roughly 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluff. So I'm going to throw in addition to my queens plus ace-king, I'm going to have jacks, ace-queen offsuit, and then suited combos of ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen, king-jack. I get called. We get a Jack 4-3 rainbow flop. I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet. He quickly calls. We pick up a king on the turn. I think I could keep betting my jacks. I think I want to trap with my kings. I could keep betting my aces. I would check my queens. Ace-queen, especially the club combos, could be bad. I've also got king-jack, king-queen here. I definitely want to trap with my kings. It's super strong. Super strong. Hard for him to have a king he can call down with. He checks back pretty quickly. I think at this point I just want to go ahead and put this all in. Try to get paid. Roughly a pot-sized bet is left. I could have ace-queen that didn't blast the turn because bluffing here like this. I guess even ace-jack is my next worst hand. Going to open ace-8 offsuit on the button, raise first in on the upper right-hand table. Lower right-hand table will raise first in with the ace-7 suited. Upper right-hand table will raise first in from the cutoff with the king-7 suited. You get called by a recreational player in the big blind playing on a half stack on the 10-4-3 two-tone flop. I'll go ahead and range bet small. Against the 3-bet over here on the upper right-hand table, I'll just go ahead and fold the king-7. This is actually a decent spot to keep barreling this the overcard hit, which can scare him off all kinds of stuff. I've got some outs, and that the ace is probably still good if it comes in. Go about 11 into 9. Now he goes ahead and he snap calls. I think I've got no choice but to just barrel off against this guy here. I've got pretty decent, I could still have ace-king and I block that. If he's got even 10x, it feels pretty weak on this river after I've been blasting away. His weaker pairs, his flush draws should all fold out. I don't want to show down ace-high here. It's hard for him to have a queen or a jack unless he had him with a flush draw. Those are the hands that are most likely to calm me down. And it is okay to bluff fish, even though it won't always work, just because fish have weak hands that you can bully them off on the river. If they call too much, is just an oversimplification, is rationale to not bluff them. I'd rather he'd fold quickly here, but I'm glad he hasn't snap called. And he goes ahead and folds queen-king. I did not think I would get him to fold a hand that strong, but congrats to him for showing me his soul read and his hero fold there as he folds top pair to my triple barrel, even though he's only on a half stack and I've got a stone cold bluff with ace high. that's about it. So this is Charlie Murphy signing off. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.